Okay, guys, today we're going to talk about supply side policy. And just to revisit some of the things that we said earlier, remember the goal of supply side policy is to increase production in an economy and to increase the quality and the quantity of factors of production. So, as we're doing that, you have to remember that there can be a significant difference in the short-term and long-term effects. So a common example would be something like building a bridge or building a railroad or maybe improving the port in your country or something like that. I think of the country I came from. Actually, I'm wearing my Panama shirt today. Improving the locks of the Panama Canal so more boats can come through and bigger boats can come through. So anyhow, in the short term, we have to remember that there can definitely and will definitely be increases in aggregate demand. But that doesn't mean that it's a demand side policy. I mean, again, for the Panama Canal lock expansion project, they're paying millions and billions of dollars for people to come in and make those locks bigger. Well, obviously, that's going to be an increase in aggregate demand. However, it's really about why you're doing it, not so much the immediate effect. Because the long-term effect is that we're going to see the productive capacity or the aggregate supply of that country really increase. So the key to remember when you look at these is what's the goal? If the goal is to improve aggregate supply, it's a supply-side policy. And again, with some of the other things that we may have talked about with fiscal and monetary policy, remember the goal was just to get demand going. It was just to get money into the hands of the people. Okay? So if there's no long-term supply growth goal, it's a demand-side policy. Okay? Otherwise, if there is, well then of course it's going to be a supply-side policy. So then the trick is to just figure out which one's going on. So something like tax cuts. So for example, under fiscal policy, we said one of the common things they'll do is adjust the automatic stabilizer. So they'll cut taxes to improve aggregate demand, so people are paying less tax out and have more money to spend. Well, again, if that's the whole goal, that's it, then it's only a demand side policy. But if it's a tax cut based at, if it's going to be, we'll give you a tax refund to put solar panels on your house, okay, which happened back in the States. Well, now the country is, sure, they have more aggregate demand, but now maybe the country is more capable of producing electricity because people aren't using, the standard electric generators or whatever might happen to get their own electricity, so that electricity can be used for something else. If it's a tax cut aimed at a company and it's based on hiring, okay, well again, yeah, it's aggregate demand, but if that goal is linked to increasing aggregate supply, then it becomes a supply side policy. So it very much in this is about the argument you make. And again, we can always go back to a diagram with this and go, okay, well, if what we want to see is the aggregate supply curves move over to the right, like we're seeing here, well, even if you had equilibrium before, so looking at the red, well, once we've moved over to this position here, equilibrium would no longer exist. So for equilibrium to happen in this case, we would have to see AD start to move off to the right and would eventually end up something like that. Okay? So this gets into a lot of things. It gets a little bit into your homework when you looked at what was called Say's law. The idea that supply does create its own demand, and again, that's kind of what we're showing here, is that because supply shifted off to the right, more demand had to occur. Okay? It gets into that, but again, a lot of this is very theoretical. One last thing to remember, one of the big weaknesses that we talked about with supply-side economics is this right here, that it's politically tough. That a lot of times when you try to increase that aggregate supply, it seems like you're stealing from the poor to feed the rich, or taxing the poor at a higher rate, or maybe not at a reduced rate, so that you can give more money to corporations or to people who are wealthy. And again, that's a tough sell. It might be the right thing to do, But if you can't get people to support it, it doesn't really matter.